Hi, my name is Tom, and I need a lot of Al-Anon. Glad to be here this evening to share some experience, strength, and hope. As I was sitting, I like to sit a bit beforehand to kind of let things settle, and I was talking with Larry and noticed this very attractive Seahawks hat, and I had a flashback. Maybe 10 or 20 years ago, I was flying up to Seattle on United Airlines to do something, and the plane was delayed, and then the plane was delayed, and we were all waiting to board the plane, and some people had been drinking a little, and one of the fellows who'd been drinking a little was being very, very effusive and loud, and I just had an insight that he was going to be my date. Sitting next to me, and then we all got on the plane, and sure enough, he was. He sat right next to me, right here, and then there was another delay, so we all got off the plane, and he went to the bar and had a few more social drinks, and then he came back and sat down and stood up, "Go Seahawks!" And then he threw up. I fly a lot. I've never seen anyone use the bag before, but he did. He threw up twice, and then he fell asleep on top of me. And so all that just came back a few minutes ago, and I'm just full of gratitude. Oh, I like this part of the world. I live in Oakland, California. I've been there a very long time. And I'm happy to share this evening some of my experience as someone who needs Al-Anon meetings, an Al-Anon program, an Al-Anon fellowship. If there's anything I say here tonight that's useful, please use it. And if it's not useful, don't worry about it. There are so many different ways people experience being alive, and there are different ways people experience being in recovery. And I've been probably going to Al-Anon steadily for about 30 years. And I had to get sober first. I never would have noticed my Al-Anon crazy if I hadn't gotten sober first. And I was a high school teacher. And I taught high school kids drunk, and I taught high school kids sober, and it's easier to teach them if you're drunk. But what I noticed sober was a lot of high school kids act just like alcoholics. And a lot of alcoholics act just like high school kids. I'm sure there's a number of teachers here tonight, and I mentioned that to a group of teachers in recovery, and one of the teachers says, "I teach third graders." And the same is true there. A lot of alcoholics act like third graders, and a lot like third graders act like alcoholics. So with kids, there's drama and trauma and excitement and chaos and things blowing up all the time. And I was living in Los Angeles, teaching at the Jesuit high school in the middle of town, kind of South Koreatown, if you're familiar with Los Angeles. And here's what I thought. I thought God should work through me to help all the bad kids. That's what I thought. The kids in trouble, the kids in trauma, the kids experiencing things. I wanted to be the channel. And I was in Al-Anon for a little while, and someone explained to me, I don't get to choose the channel. There's one source, it's the higher power. There are many channels. Channels change all the time. And I'm not in charge of that. But I was making myself very special and grandiose and powerful. If a kid got into trouble with booze or dope, rather than throwing them out, we'd sentence them to AA meetings. And they had to go a couple times a week, and I'd see them there. And it fluffed up my sense of importance, I guess. Anyway, who cares? I burned out as a teacher. I was so overly stimulated and so overly angry. I spent all my time being exhausted or angry. And this is terribly embarrassing. You young people can Google this. There was a band called Devo. And here I am, a well-educated, at the time 35-year-old teacher. I was arguing with a 16-year-old boy about Devo. He thought it was the greatest music in the world, and I was trying to explain Beethoven to him or something. I don't know what it was. But I had a moment of clarity, and the moment of clarity was, you are a crazy person arguing with the kid. He gets to like the music he likes, even if it's dreck. But I was upholding Western civilization. And if you're doing that, you become very crazy, much crazier. So I left teaching when I was 5 years sober, and I moved back to the San Francisco Bay Area, or as we say, the Oakland Bay Area, and got into social work. Hiring and firing and planning and organizing and doing all kinds of things. I don't have the skills to do that, but I had the job. And I learned a tremendous number of things that I never wanted to know. And I sure learned a lot about my limitations, but I went back into Al-Anon because I was surrounded by crazy people. And that helped a little bit, but I still didn't get Al-Anon. I mean, it's, what's your deal? Different focus. What are you talking about? My first Al-Anon meeting in Los Angeles, I went to at an Episcopal church on Wilshire Boulevard. This would be 1979, maybe. And there were a bunch of women in the room, all sitting around a table. 2 or 3 men sat in the back. I sat with them. And the woman who was secretary of the meeting had been secretary for several hundred years. And she knew everything. She was kind of a combination of Martha Stewart, Hillary Clinton, and Heloise. I mean, she knew a lot of stuff, and she really did. And all the people at the meeting, they would read all the stuff you read in Al-Anon, which keeps going forever, but all the people in the meeting would present her with their problems, and she would solve them. It's like Solomon, divide the child in half. I expected to hear that. In her behalf, she really had a lot of practical common sense, but that's not Al-Anon. I didn't know that at the time, but that's not Al-Anon, that's North Korea. That's dictatorship, And I've had to find this out. The way we sponsor people in Al-Anon, and control is heroin for us. The way we sponsor people, instead of telling them what to do, we share our experience, strength, and hope. So if they're having a crisis, what I would do is say, I have been in that crisis, and here's what I did. So you're sharing experience. You don't tell them to move in or move out or get divorced or shoot them or anything, You just share your experience, and the person has to learn how to make decisions. It's very different than running someone's life. So that Al-Anon meeting gave me a little bit of a bad taste for Al-Anon. And then I tried it again when I moved into the Bay Area, and it was like trying to grab smoke. I'm going to meetings. What's happening? I'm about 7, 8, 9 years sober, which is where I began experiencing a vast amount of rage. And another teacher gave me a cassette tape of a woman from West Texas. Her name was Blanche D. And she was a high school teacher from Permian Basin High School in West Texas. And she had been in Al-Anon for a long time. And it's one of those cassette tapes that I played over and over and over and over again in my car. And again, you young people can Google cassette tapes. But they were very powerful for a while. And here's what she said that helped me work a program. She grew up in northern Florida. She went to Baylor University in Texas. She was raised Baptist. She desperately poor in northern Florida. She said when she was a little girl, they taught her some stuff that just is not true. Like what? She said she was told, what you don't know can't hurt you. And she said, listen, what I did not know about alcoholism almost killed 4 people. So a big part of the Al-Anon program is learning about the disease and learning about the recovery. I was in upper New York State doing something, and it was I was leading a group of women in Al-Anon and families and stuff and so forth. And I gave some talks, and I was listening to this lady, and she came in on a one-on-one, and she said, if I had known you were an alcoholic, I never would have come. And I've been in Al-Anon a little bit, so instead of saying, screw you, which see, in NA they say first thought wrong. You know, that's just not helpful. Act, don't react. Well, what's that about, I said. She said, well, my husband, he ruined my life and the lives of our children. Oh. How old are your kids? Well, they're in their 20s. Oh. And then I thought I was dealing with a brand new Al-Anon person. So I said, so how long have you been going to meetings? And she said, 10 years. Have you listened to anything in 10 years? Besides your own echo chamber of rage and hurt? You know, clearly not. She did not understand how this is a family disease. That her husband was a sick man, not a bad man. I mean, those very basic things. So learning about the disease is really important. So what else did Blanche learn that wasn't true? She said she was taught God helps those who help themselves. And she said that's not true either. God helps those who ask. I need to remember that. Because I don't always remember to ask. I went on a conference once, and a woman there was giving talks. She was very, very interesting. She said, you need to remember. She said, a lot of us who've been going to meetings for a long time, we know a lot of things, but that doesn't mean we remember anything. You need to remember to ask for help. Remember to return the phone calls. Remember to pay your bills. You got to remember to remember. And with the higher power stuff on a regular basis, my habit now for the last 100 years, the first time I ask for help is when I get in the shower. Just help me. Now it's help me, don't fall. But I really mean it, help me. And then Blanche said this. She said, in Al-Anon, we learn how to keep our sails out of other people's wind. That's the image I needed, because I need pictures. And I don't know if this has happened in your part of the world, but there's a lot of wind blowing. And when I was a much younger man, I liked that. I liked the excitement. I liked the drama. I liked the emergencies. I liked the emergency unit. I liked, crises. What a great night. And I just don't think like that anymore at all. I was ordained a priest in 1978 and worked at a parish in downtown Hollywood. It was a very busy place, 3 different hospitals. It was a very busy place, lots going on, and it was a sleazy part of the world at that time. They've upscaled it, but prostitution, narcotics, tourism, and that was the choir. And that was the choir, so it's... But I was on duty, which meant 24 hours. When the phone rings, you pick it up. And the phone rang, and I picked it up, and It was like, I don't know, 1 in the morning or something like that. And there was a motel down the street with hourly rates. I don't know if you have those in La Conner. But one of the young ladies who worked the neighborhood had been attacked by a client, and she was a nice Catholic girl, and stabbed and alive, and one of the priests. So the phone comes through, and I am dressed and out the door in seconds. I am there before the 911 team shows up. It was extremely dramatic, and there were cops, and there were ambulance, and there were the ETM guys, and there were mirrors on the ceiling. I had never seen that before. So I did what I could do. I prayed with her. I anointed her. I was going to go in the ambulance like you see in the movies, but you're in the way. So they don't want you riding in the ambulance. Stay out of the way, you'll kill her, which is an important Al-Anon principle. I went back to my place, and I vibrated with adrenaline for 3 days. I was high. And as a younger person, I found that thrilling. In my teens and 20s and 30s, I found that thrilling. But here's the problem. It's Isaac Newton. What goes up comes down. To every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And if I'm going to be wildly adrenalized and hyper with energy and excitement, there will be a downside. And I started getting more and more tired and more angry and more played out. And I remember, again, the picture I had was I felt, I'm getting to the end of my 30s, early 40s, elastic that's been pulled a couple of dozen times too much, just kind of a sag. I just didn't have bounce. And I remember taking a break, and I'm surrounded by some really wonderful, smart people, and they said, you need a break. So I was going to go for a week or two to Santa Barbara and eat and sleep and go to the beach a lot. And I was on the beach for a couple of days in a row, and there was a fellow that walked by, kind of friendly, older than me. Within a couple of days, we had, conversations, and I don't know, he was in his 60s, I was late 30s, early 40s, and he said, have you moved into the neighborhood? No, I said, I'm just taking a break. And he said, what's that all about? And I said, well, I'm, overstressed and over this and over that, and I just need some time off. And he said, wow, how old are you? I said, 38. He said, when I was 30, and he had a funny accent, funny way with words. It's like English wasn't quite his first language. And he said, gee, when I was 38, I had a wife and kids and 3 jobs, and I was making $1 gazillion a day. And I had my stroke at 45. And it took me a year to learn how to talk again. Tell me more. How do you wean yourself off the need for adrenaline and excitement? And I found, maybe it's time to deal with mom and dad. Early 40s, late 40s, I've been sober a while. My toes been in the Al-Anon water, but I haven't really taken a look at very much. So I went back and I started some ACA stuff and some Al-Anon stuff. Again, that image of blowing wind and sails was very helpful. I got a therapist in Berkeley who ran the methadone clinic, so she's not a romantic. And we talked for 2 years. She was very helpful to me. And it's with her that I said out loud for the first time that my father was an alcoholic. And I did not suddenly feel liberated and free. I felt shame. I mean, I can be an alcoholic. My oldest brother can be an alcoholic, but not my dad. And I had some work to do around good old mom and dad and shame and rage and exhaustion and acting like a crazy person all the time. So I guess as a result of some of that work with meetings and some therapy, at the end of my 40s, early 50s, I'm now 77, almost 78, I said, I want to live my life without trauma and without drama. I mean, it's going to happen. But I don't want to chase it. I don't want to spend all my time there. And I began finding some friends in Al-Anon with whom I could have this conversation, feeling very responsible for things that aren't my responsibility, trying to fix family members, trying to fix strangers, chasing ambulances, running into emergency rooms. I've had Al-Anon dreams. There's drinking dreams, you know. I've had Al-Anon dreams where, and this was true, I'm wearing a cape flying around town. And I said, I'm not in charge. You know, I'm just not in charge. So let me talk a little bit about the Serenity prayer, because I find it really useful. We ask for serenity so we can make decisions. It's a bad idea to make decisions if you're really high. It's a bad idea to make decisions if you're really low. It's bad to make decisions if you're highly agitated, all those places. If you're in love, you know, just, whoa. You know, I love you, what's your name, is a warning. You know, it's not an invitation. So give me some serenity. Give me some serenity. And then there's things I cannot change. Oh, you can do anything. No, I can't. There are things I cannot change. And Blanche, on that same, either that tape or in conversations I had with her over the years, you know, some of us come into Al-Anon, we feel so guilty, full of shame, embarrassment, self-loathing, guilt. What I should have known, I should have done, I could have, all that world. And Blanche said, a lot of us would prefer to feel guilty rather than powerless. Powerless is too scary. There must have been something I could have done. A couple of my friends have suicided. And that triggers a lot. I should have known. I should have read the signs. And it goes into a tailspin of stuff. Anyway, things I cannot change. I'm closer to 80 than 70. I get tired more quickly. I bounce back more slowly. I do not have the energy or the time to waste on things I can't change. And here are 3 things I cannot change. I heard this at a meeting, so it's true. I cannot change the past. I cannot change the truth. And I cannot change you. That frees up the whole day, you know? I mean, it's easy for me to go back to past stuff and rehash them and relive them and redo them. I'm an amateur history person, and I mean, I can be angry about stuff that happened 600 years ago, you know? I mean, why not? Because it's nuts. That's why. I can't change the past. Some things happen, there's consequences. I don't like them, I can live with them. Some things didn't happen, and there's consequences. I can live with that. Can't change the past. Can't change the truth. Like the laws of physics, invented by God. They're as true as Scripture. What goes up comes down. To every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I can't change the speed of light. I can't change gravity. Those are all real things. Biology, digestion, space and time. I can't change those. And I can't change you. Loving someone does not change them. It changes me. And hating someone does not change them. It changes me. But if you listen to a lot of country western music, or telenovelas, or soap operas, you live in an alternate reality. My love is so strong it will protect everybody. Nonsense! The experience many of us have of loving someone is powerlessness. There's nothing I can do for the people I love most. I don't have any kids. I don't know how parents let kids out of their sight. And even if they're in your sight, it doesn't help. One of the scariest Al-Anon stories I know, and I'm just sharing it with you because it's New Year's. Mom is a helicopter mom. A few control issues. She's also a pastor of a great big church. A few more control issues. And she has all of her children cell phones so she can check in on them 4 times a day. Her 15-year-old son, talking to her on his cell phone, jumps in front of an oncoming train. He lives. Powerless. I'd rather feel guilty. I get that one. What can I change? 3 things. I can change my thinking. I can change my behavior. And I can change my attitudes. And that's the work of the program, the hard work of the program. I need new ideas. I need an ongoing education. I have to change some of my behavior. One of the behaviors I had to change, this is years ago, I listened to another cassette. And the guy was talking about people don't take care of themselves. How a lot of alcoholic people don't take care of themselves. And on the West Coast, over a period of a couple of years, there were 1,000 drunk driving fatalities. Not one was wearing a seat belt, not one. This is before it became the law. And I said to myself, this is something I could do. I could start wearing a seat belt as a sign of self-care. And it took a little, but a person in recovery would wear a seat belt. You're worth it, New ideas. New behavior. That in Narcotics Anonymous, they say first thought wrong. And sometimes when I'm caught by surprise, I do not say the first thing that comes to mind because it's not helpful. I was at a meeting in Los Angeles, and I get angry all the time. I do get angry. I also want you to know I do feel fear. As an older person, I'm more aware of this than I was when I was in my 60s and 70s because I think I was too busy to notice. But there are things that I react to. And I mentioned at a meeting that I get angry. I'm surrounded by fools, And this person said, if you were really spiritual, you'd never get angry. Really? See, to every year of recovery, you get 1 more second of response time. That's the difference between 5 years in Al-Anon and 10 years in Al-Anon. 5 very important seconds. And so I didn't have to say the first 5 things that occurred to me. And then I was able to say, oh, that's very helpful. which is sarcasm, in case you're looking for a definition of sarcasm. What an idiot. Anyway, I just want you to know I stand before you. I've been a priest for a very long time. I've been sober a very long time. I've been an Al-Anon a very long time. I'm a college graduate. And on a regular basis, I have anxiety and fear, and I have to, I get a daily reprieve from the worst of my crazy. But the worst of my crazy really is there. I remember I was about 20 years in the program, and I had some unhappy experiences. And I thought I should be so much better by now. And the 7th step talks about having defects of character removed. So I thought they should be gone. And I would be at meetings with people who told me all their defects of character were gone. So I have no opinion on that, by the way. I'm sure for them they are gone and they're perfectly normal. So I asked my sponsor, I'm having troubles with anger, carelessness, prejudice, bigotry. I mean, stuff that scares me, frightens me, triggers me. I start reacting too quickly. I'm unfair. I'm out of balance. And I said, so if I've asked to have these removed, why do I still have them? And Terry said, we ask to have them removed. We do not ask to have them erased. And for me, they've been removed, back attic or back room or basement, and they stay there as long as I'm fairly balanced. But if I'm knocked out of balance, they hook up in groups of 2 or 3. I mean, I had an experience. I was talking to a boss a few years ago, and I'm always a little anxious around authority figures. That's always been true. And I was seeing the boss, and he asked a question, and I got very frightened. But the way fear works for me, I don't notice fear, I notice anger. So I got frightened, but I was angry, and I got very defensive. And to cover the situation, I lied. It was so easy. Oh, what a struggle I have. No, it just flowed out as normally as any other time I've lied in my life. The difference was when I was going back home, it tasted bad. And I got home about an hour away, and the bad taste was there. And I did a little bit of inventory about what happened. And what happened is I got frightened, I got angry, and I lied. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to sleep on this, and then I need to let His Majesty the King know. And I wrote him back the next morning, and I just said, yesterday you asked me X, Y, Z. Here's a better answer. And I gave him an accurate response. Now notice, when wrong, promptly admitting it is an important part of a program of recovery. Instead of saying, I haven't really done anything dumb since Carter was president. No, I've got some regular dumb stuff that comes up for me, and I just need to pay attention to it. My sponsor, terrible alcoholic home, he was somewhere and an old guy came up and he said, are you this family from that part of the world? And Terry said, oh yeah, that's us. He said, I knew your grandfather. He was the oldest of 6 boys. He was the only one that did not die of alcoholism. He had one son, Terry's father, who died of alcoholism when Terry was 5 years old. So it's generational and it's deep and it's just in so many places, and you're so used to it you don't notice the crazy. So Terry taught me a lot of things about telling the truth and about turning things over and about asking for help and about cleaning up my mess and about sharing experience, strength, and hope in good ways. And he developed dementia. Scared all of us to death. What happens when your sponsor begins disappearing? And it took 10 years. But he was disappearing a little. He was repeating jokes and repeating himself, and he knew what was going on. He went to a meeting. He'd been to the doctor. They took a picture of his brain, and part of it's pretty dark, the short-term memory part. And he went to a meeting, and he said, "I'm Terry, and I'm losing my mind." Ha, ha, ha. "I've got a picture," he said. And he was not afraid of this. It was just the next thing. His mom had dementia. He knew it was in the family. And what I watched him do was live with this without shame and without fear and without anger. But he'd talk about it. And one-on-one, he was right with me. And if there were too many of us, he couldn't follow the conversation. I did a program with him, and he was very good on his feet. He gave great talks. We were together, and then he got back to Los Angeles, and I called him, and I said, "Do you want to do this again next year?" And he said, "No." He said, "I'm stopping giving retreats. I'm stopping traveling. I want to make this decision for myself. I don't want someone else to have to make this for me." Okay. So I'd go and see him and spend time, and I was letting go of a few busy things I've been doing. And he said, "Some things we let go of, some things are taken away." And he was at a meeting, and what he shared was, don't try harder, resist less. Step 2 has always been the tough step for me. I don't have a lot of difficulty with powerlessness and unmanageability. I'm half Irish, I'm half Swedish. I know it's hopeless. The sun is burning out, and that's what I wake up to most days. The problem for me has always been that second step, which is about a power greater than ourselves restoring us to sanity. It means getting your life back, coming back to life, getting back on your feet, rebuilding. I was pretty sure that you could rebuild your lives. I didn't think I could rebuild mine, because I am unique, special, and different. And you're simple, well-intentioned people, you know. I'm broken and twisted, and too many of the batteries have been burned out for me to ever hope for change. And then I started noticing some things changing. And the program works for anybody in the room. I was in the room. God, as I understand, God is present everywhere and active everywhere and can take a real long time. Step 3 for me, it can be very involved. People do all sorts of things about turning things over, and there's prayers and there's devotions and there's stuff. What I pretty much do, my active third step experience is this: I need to show up, get out of my head, get out of my room. I need to show up. I need to pay attention. I need to tell the truth, like with the boss. And I need to let go of the results. And if I show up, pay attention, and tell the truth, it works out somehow. Frequently, it catches me completely by surprise. I understand alcoholism as being an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. And a lot of us come in to recovery. This is Al-Anon now. exhausted beyond imagination, and deeply angry, and very cynical. And it takes a while for life to come back. There's example after example after example of that. But when I go to meetings, I remember it. I think untreated Al-Anon craziness kills people. People die 10, 15, 20 years ahead of time because they've worked themselves to death, they've worried themselves to death, they need help and friends. One of the ways I understood alcoholism, allergy of the body and obsession of the mind, I really get, and I believe that. Alcoholism is like dancing with a gorilla. You're not done dancing until the gorilla is done dancing. Again, I like the image very much, you know. And when I heard the story, they didn't say dancing with the gorilla. They said dating the gorilla. And they didn't say dating. But you are definitely on the receiving end. And there's nothing you can do until it's done. You know, go get done. If you're clean and sober tonight, it means the gorilla has let go. If the gorilla has let go, get out of the cage. And don't go back into the cage, even if the gorilla starts humming your song, which it does. All of a sudden, the music's right and the gorilla's so cute and you could have such a good time, you know. This time it'll be different. Now, people who love us visit the zoo a lot. And they look at the lions and the tigers and the bears. And then they walk by the gorilla cage and they see the person they love with the alcohol, with the gorilla, and they go nuts. It might be their parent, mom or dad. Might be their spouse. Those are two completely different kinds of crazy, by the way. Might be one of their kids or grandkids, and that's a totally different level of terror. So all those folks are in need of a peer group and friends and companions and allies. They look in the gorilla cage, they see the person they love with the gorilla, they need to do something, take action. So they get into the cage and they start vacuuming and sweeping and moving the furniture around and hanging a nice picture of the Dalai Lama. I'm sure that will help. Or some nice Chinese poetry, and none of that helps. So they get between the gorilla and the person they love when they try to pull them apart, and then the gorilla does great damage to us. You know? So there's a program, and it's called Al-Anon. And a lot of the Al-Anon program comes down to this. Stay out of the cage. Let's repeat that. Stay out of the... But I only want to sweep and vacuum. We know when it just doesn't help anyone. We're meeting over by the giraffes. And we will discuss our need to try to clean up other people's cages. Al-Anon is it's a life-saving program. I think it's where we learn about boundaries and limits and sacredness and what's my business and what's my work and what isn't. And I think it's where we learn how to be real grown-ups and human beings. I'm very grateful for the invitation to come tonight. Thanks so much.